Welcome to Sword Fight Garage Band. Today I wanted to talk a little bit about the different grips utilized in historical European martial arts. When we talk to students about first picking up a sword, most of the time we want them just to get used to what it feels like to swing this tool through space. And once they begin moving the weapon, they'll start generally adjusting through the different grips that we'll then intentionally teach and use within our lessons. And so I like to begin with teaching students about the grip utilized the least in longsword, which is known as hammer grip. When I bring my hand directly perpendicular to the handle of the sword and grip it here, this gives me a strong purchase on the grip of the sword, but it's not typically how I will hold a longsword when performing cuts, simply because when I do that and I move my sword through space, the tip of the sword doesn't travel as far as when I engage the next grip, known as the handshake grip. But this is a transitional grip. This is a grip that can be used at certain times. It's certainly a grip that also gets used in single-handed weapons. We'll talk a little bit about that in a little bit. But the next grip, the grip that is used most of the time when fencing longsword, is known as the handshake grip. So the handshake grip is one where we take the hand, we rest it at an angle across the handle, lightly wrap the fingers across it so that we end up with an angled grip over the handle of the sword, with our index finger wrapped loosely around, the thumb wrapped around the back of the handle here, with this gap here in the webbing of our hand. That is how we grip with our forehand. Our bottom hand we can just put around the pommel or the handle, however we'd like. But when I inscribe a cut utilizing that grip, my point now travels further towards my fencing partner. This ensures that when I'm making my cuts and I end them at the proper position, I'm ready to continue a thrust into my fencing partner without having to make an additional adjustment of where my blade is. It also ensures greater structure within my cuts because it forces the tip of my sword to travel before the rest of it does. If I'm in hammer grip and I throw a cut, the tip of my sword ends up traveling to the rear of the rest of my handle. And that robs the structure of what's happening with the cut. So I want to make sure to keep that handshake grip in such a manner that it propels the tip first when I throw my cuts. The third grip that will typically be utilized with a longsword is the thumb grip, and that's where I take my hand and I rotate the sword such that my thumb is either on the shield, the crossguard, or on the handle, but my thumb is now perpendicular to the flat of the blade. The thumb grip is utilized with certain specific master cuts or Meisterhau within German longsword. It can be utilized when going into long point as a means by which to hold the sword such that it gives you greater resistance to what your fencing partner might be doing against you. If I engage in the forehand or handshake grip and I'm holding my sword point forward towards my fencing partner and they push against the tip of my sword or against the strong of my sword, I'll feel a certain level of resistance. But then once you transition into thumb grip, you'll find that you have a greater ability to resist motions or movement or pushing against your sword blade. And that happens simply because of the geometry of what's happening with how you are holding the weapon. Especially when I transition into one of the guards such as plow, where I have the sword out to the side of my body with the pommel pointed back towards my hip. From here, this gives me a direct skeletal line to the flat of my blade, which were I to be in a handshake grip, I'd have to break my wrist and that alignment is off. Whereas from the thumb gripped position, I have a direct line of force. So you can see how that might change the amount of resistance you're able to provide with the weapon when changing into that grip. If I transition to a one-handed weapon, all of those grips can still be utilized. Whether you're fencing with saber or arming sword or rapier, there are still going to be times when you can transition into the hammer grip, into the handshake grip, or into the thumb grip. Now, thumb grip typically is not utilized in saber, but it can be. It can also be utilized in rapier and other one-handed weapons. It's used typically in one-handed weapons. You'll see it used in treatises on messers. Will very often utilize a thumb grip to achieve their presence within the bind for winding actions. But all three of those grips can be utilized with one-handed weapons as well. And again, what they achieve with the cuts are going to be very similar to when you're utilizing longsword. The one thing I will say is that with single-handed weapons, it is more common to switch into a hammer grip for some actions. Typically, if you are getting close core to core with your fencing partner and performing cuts inside into the body or in close space, utilizing the strong of the sword, it's going to be easier to throw close, tight cuts with a hammer grip than if your hand is still in that handshake gripped position. The handshake grip is going to be utilized for cuts at distance with the weak of the blade, where those cuts are coming in near the tip of the sword. And also, when it comes to the parries that you make with the sword, you can make a parry from the handshake grip when you are making the parry out in front of you. But when we're starting to make parries closer to our body, then we're going to be transitioning into a hammer gripped position when we make those parries. So with all three of those grips, you need to be able to transition pretty smoothly between all of them. And that's one of those things that you're going to want to practice. Thank you for joining me today at Sword Fight Garage Band. Happy fencing.